The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
Thank you so much for downloading this episode of So What Do You Really Do, the podcast where I, your host, Dead Air Dennis Mattler, interview artists and entertainers about their day jobs. And the artist and entertainer that we are interviewing today is comedian Paul Virzi. Paul Virzi is a comedian from New York. You may have heard of him a couple years ago when it was announced that Bill Burr would be producing his Comedy Central special. This interview was done in conjunction with Dig Boston, my editor at Dig. Hit me out and said, hey, do you want to interview Paul for us this time around? And I said yes, because a couple years ago, Tommy O'Deeds, Boston comedian Tommy O'Deeds, did an interview with Paul. And so I did a follow-up. We talked about him being a father, about doing comedy, about his kids, the travel from Westchester, New York to New York City every night just to do comedy, which is an hour drive to do comedy. And we talked about a couple other things. He has some really good tips, or he says some good things, some words of wisdom, I suppose you could say it that way, for comedians who are doing stuff. I think it's a good interview. It's fun. If you're coming here from the Q&A interview in the Dig, this is an expanded version of it. It's unedited for the most part. They trim the ends here or there. Hey, look at the professional audio radio guy that did not shut off his phone before doing his intro. And I'm not going to take that out because I don't feel like it. So anyway, it's a good talk. Paul's a good guy. We had some fun. And I hope you enjoy the full unedited conversation with myself and comedian Paul Virzi. And we should be cooking with gas. Nice. All right, sir. Hey, first and foremost, sorry to hear about the flat tire and the whole situation there, but I was wondering, how was Father's Day for you?
Father's Day was great, man. Every Father's Day, my wife knows that all I really want to do is I want to go play golf, smoke a cigar, play golf, have a couple of drinks, and after the golf round is over, just hang with my kids. So it's Father's Day is always awesome.
Oh, that's good. Do your kids, they're about the age where they're still making gifts, right?
They are. So my kids are, my son is 10 and my daughter is 7. So it's kind of fun. Yeah, they're at good ages, self-sufficient, hilarious. It's a lot of fun with them.
The reason I ask mostly about the kids is because, you've been doing comedy a while. Kids are still young. You started comedy before they're born. From material-wise, has there been, not even just about like creating new material, talking about your kids, but has there been a significant difference in going from like being a single man doing comedy to being a married man doing comedy to being a father who's doing comedy?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And the answer is, there's a big misconception in comedy. A lot of comedians, I've been doing this a long time. I'm in New York City, and a lot of comedians are under the impression that, like, man, I can't get married and commit. I got to focus on my act or, kids and getting a house and doing all that. That's going to hold me back and I guess, put a damper on the career, where that's absolutely opposite in my case. I remember talking to a lot of comedians, great comedians, and they were like, no, when my son was born and my daughter was born, I kicked it into gear. I mean, I don't know if my kids being born made me go harder. My wife says when my son was born, she saw a difference in me, but I think I was also getting more opportunities at the time. But I was always focused, but you get better material because it's real life. As a matter of fact, I had the pleasure, I opened up for my best friend and my mentor, Bill Burr, at Madison Square Garden, and I did a joke about playing one-on-one basketball with my son, and I only did the joke a couple of times, and people were like, you got to do that joke at the Garden. And I did it in front of 18,000 people, and it tore the place down. Honestly, I'm not even trying to be, arrogant. Believe me, I would be the first to try to give you a funny story and say bomb, but it killed the Garden, and it was just truth. It was just something hilarious that happened playing basketball with my son. And I remember when that moment happened, telling people the story, and we were all like, yeah, man, that's for the stage. That's a bit. That's a joke. So that's what the family, the family life and all that stuff. For me, things were better because you grew up. When you're 21 years old, what are you going to talk about? Masturbation and drinking. And there's only so many things you could really touch on in your early, in your early 20s when you start doing it. But then as you grow, you get a voice and you see life, and that makes the material better. At least that's my opinion. That's my experience too.
Now, are you basically, do you consider yourself a stay-at-home dad with the kids? Like, are you their primary, not to say caregiver as if your wife's not involved, but I assume does your wife work and then you spend most of your day at home with the kids?
Yeah, it's kind of like as my career has grown and I'm headlining across the country and I'm trying to develop a new hour to do the next special, it's kind of like 50-50 where like, yes, I'll be home with them, in the day. But if I guess basically the best answer to that is we're kind of at the point now where like, my sister or some babysitters will come and help because it's a lot of, not just performing at night, but, meetings during the day or trying to plan some stuff. Plus, you know how big podcasts are now.
Yeah.
So it's doing a podcast, doing this podcast, going to like Sirius Radio to promote something. So we make it work with the babysitters and stuff like that. But I do love my few days off early in the week if I have that to be with the kids until my wife gets home.
Now summertime's upon us. Kids are out of school. Have you had in past taking your kids on tour with you, or do you have plans of doing that, or do you think they're too young at this point, but maybe someday in the future?
No, another great question. And for the first time, we did something where I was performing over at the West Palm Beach Improv. And, they put you up in a nice place that's like a resort with a pool, and you could kind of walk to the gig because there's a lot of shops and nice area. So they came with me to that. And I'm also doing Boston next week, which I'm excited about. And I think my family will come out on Saturday and stuff. So, my son is 10. He's starting to really understand what I do. And if he sees me, like on TV or a clip of Standup or something like that, he's like really like they're starting to understand. And he's a sports guy like I am. So maybe take him on the road sometime and go to a game during the day, and then, have maybe somebody watch him at the hotel, like somebody in my family or something at night. That's definitely something I want to do more of. Since
you brought up sports and your kid, you're a sports guy. I know that, big sports fan.
Yes.
Have you become one of those dreaded sports parents that goes a little too crazy at the games?
You know what, man? It's really funny. I do a joke about this, how I'm not the father that goes nuts, but I was convinced that in one of my son's basketball games that the game was fixed against them. And I started to really go like at the refs, like not at the, but like, are you guys seeing this? Like it's always against us. And I started to notice that. But one thing that happened really, really funny, Dennis, the other day, and it's really weird you bringing this up because my son's baseball team was in a playoff game, and my son has one of the best forms of throwing and pitching on the team, and he's got some velocity. He's a good pitcher. So it's a playoff game, and they needed him to go at least an inning or two to kind of stop the bleeding. And he goes in, and I'm like behind the cage, and he could see me, and the ump is there. So apparently they have like a 70-year-old ump who's like a fixture, right? This guy's like, I mean, when this guy retires, like this guy, but he's one of those like, it's going to be his way first. Like if a kid steps in the batter's box and his shirt's not tucked in, like he's like, step out, tuck the shirt in. We want to see the belt. Like he's one of those, but it's almost like he does it like weird, like for him. Do you know what I mean? It's like you know what I mean? Like it's not just about like the etiquette of the game. It's about like this old man putting his stamp on the game and stuff. So anyway, my son strikes out the first guy. Then he walks to all close pitches. Then he strikes out the next guy. So there's 2 outs, 2 on, and he's about to get out of the inning. And he's got this 2-2 count, and he throws one right at the kid's waist down Broadway. And everybody's going, and I'm ready to clap and go. Oh, he struck out 3, no runs, and the ump called it a ball. And even the coach on the other team was shaking his head, going, "That's not a ball." And I just out loud, without knowing, I just go, and I was literally 5 feet from this ump. I just go, "What?" Right? And he just stopped the game, and he took 2 steps back, and he just looked at me and like tilted his head, and we had like this stare down. And then in that moment, I'm going, oh, I don't want to ruin my son's next pitches because this guy. So I kind of like looked at him, and then, but I thought I was going to get thrown out of the game. I was like, you can't get thrown out of the game. You can't, I'm not going to get thrown out of my son's playoff game when he's on the mound and like shamefully walk to the parking lot as the parents see me. I couldn't do that because everybody would have been able to see me take that walk. And then I'm just in my car in the outfield and everybody knows I'm sitting in my car. Like it would have just been a complete disaster. So I kind of like, all right, you know what? Point taken. You're an old school guy. It's never going to change. And like that. But no, I kind of say things to my son quietly at the game. Like, come on, buddy, or I'll call him over during a timeout and go, my wife is the one. My wife is no joke, Dennis. My wife walked up to my son in a timeout in a basketball game, and all the kids were tired because it was like a super early game. And my wife just goes, "You need to." Can I curse on this or no?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so my wife just goes, "You need to cut the fucking shit, or I am taking you out of here. Stop it. There's no reason for us to be here if you're going to be playing." And I was just like, "Holy shit, man!" My wife just went in like, "Listen, if you're going to embarrass yourself and us because you're tired, I'll take you right out of this gym." And so I would say my wife more, but we kind of keep it cool anyway.
Because now I was picturing you originally as like an Earl Weaver character, getting in an um's face, kicking dirt at him and yelling at him. Now I can totally see your wife doing it, and that's the funniest thing for me is just seeing somebody's mom come up and just like turn her hat around and start screaming in an um's face.
Yeah. She'll go, "You better go talk to him because if you don't, I'm gonna, and I'll take him right out of here." It's so funny. Yeah.
All right, so your son plays sports. You're a big sports guy. In your special last year, I remember you doing a bit about Star Wars, playing Star Wars lightsabers with your kids.
Yes.
On that note, who's been the bigger influence on the other? You on your kids on sports, or your kids for nerd stuff on you? Who do you think's gathering more?
These questions are fantastic. I would say, that's such a good question. I know that this is not probably the answer that you or your listeners want to hear, but I would say that it is probably a mixture of both because my daughter has me. I'm watching Fuller House. I don't know if you watch. I'm watching Fuller House, okay, with my daughter to the point where when my daughter leaves, I'm like, I'm finishing this episode. Like I got into Fuller House was so bad. It was so bad the first couple of times that I saw it that it was like it went from so bad to like, wow, at least they're committing to this. And then I was like, wait a minute, this is kind of nostalgic and bringing me back to like being that kid in middle school who would watch Full House at night and then now my daughter is getting that innocence from it, and I don't know if that's why. So, like, I'll be like, yeah, let's go live. Let's watch a couple episodes of Fuller House, and I'm totally into it with her. But, now my son and my daughter are out in the yard hitting golf balls, going to, if we're going to go to a Yankee or Knick game, they're totally down for it. So I think, like, I'm getting this stuff from the kids. They're getting this stuff from me. But if I had to choose one, I would say the sports on my son. My son is very, very much and he's like 10 and he's coming into his own and he's got really good, strong right arm and he's kind of, one of the best, his coach played college basketball and said, your son's got the best jumper in the school, which he does for a 10-year-old. So I think that my love for sports, probably a little more, but I also love the nerdy stuff with them.
And speaking of nerdy stuff, cause you live in Westchester.
I do.
And now me as a kid growing up as a comic book fan, I couldn't wait to just go to Queens, New York, and open a Spider-Man comic and try to find the house that most resembles Peter Parker's house. Grew up in Westchester as a kid. That's where the Xavier School for the Gifted and Talented from the X-Men comics have. Was that ever something you were like, I'm going to find the X-Men, the Charles Xavier mansion or anything like that as a kid with Westchester?
Could care less.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that was something that I kind of asked one time, like where it was, and somebody said, "Oh, when they shot the movie, it was there." But no, I'm not. You know what? Oddly, I'm not really the hugest Marvel comic book. Like, I was kind of disappointed because I loved, like, one of my favorites is Superman. But the Superman movies have been pretty much a disaster. Like, there hasn't been a...
Kevin Costner is the worst Pa Kent ever. Oof.
Yeah, it's just that's the thing. It's like Superman could have been. I mean, he's basically an alien with a steel body from another planet. He's insanely, there's so much you can do with it. There's only one thing that could hurt him, and the movies have been bad. So that kind of made me go like, how are you ruining Superman? And then I did, the Avengers was cool, but I'm just not like, believe it or not, like I'm into like Harry Potter. I'm into Star Wars. I mean, I'm not like crazy into it, but I will go and see a Marvel movie. It's just I'm not one of those I gotta be there night of.
Fair enough. Speaking of Westchester, so performing in NYC
By the way, I felt the disappointment in your voice.
No, that's fine.
I felt the disappointment in your voice when you said fair enough. Part of you just goes, all right, part of me likes this guy less. But go ahead.
No, dude, it's fine. No, dude, I'm a diehard Marvel guy, and I know that not everybody is as insanely crazy about it as I am. Like, and that's totally fine. But about Westchester though, because it's about an hour outside of New York City.
That's right.
When you start getting in the car, is there like a ritual just to keep you driving, or even on the way home, the hour drive home late at night? Is there anything particular about that long drive that you dread or that you look forward to?
It's kind of like more of, I was thinking about this last night, actually. It's almost weird. I feel like you've been like following me because these questions are like exactly what's been going on like right now. And I'm not just saying that because, we're doing this interview, but like last night I drove home and it was just, what the cool thing is when you go to the city, I drive in, like you said, it's about an hour, give or take 5-10 minutes, but that's pretty much what it's around with no traffic. And cool things happen. Like last night I was at the Comedy Cellar. And, at the Comedy Cellar, you get to see friends you haven't seen in a while. You get to, just, oh, my God, what are you up to? And so I saw my buddy Michael Che. He's on Saturday Night Live, and he's a great dude. He's a good friend. So me and him were talking, and then when we were all on stage, Donald Glover, who's also Childish Gambino, he was just in the crowd hanging out. And he was laughing at the jokes. And then you go in there and you see all these people and you think about the new jokes you're doing. Like, oh, wow, that was kind of a cool night. And then some nights aren't that cool. Some nights are you go in, you do your set, and it's just like, oh, well, now I got an hour drive. But I use the drive to kind of reflect on the set, make sure that whatever bits I did that are new and refreshing and something that I think will be in the new hour and the new special, like I kind of focus on that. And then I just, listen to my either certain music or I'll listen to sports talk radio. And like last night, the Knicks drafted a guy that I wanted them to draft. So I'm listening to that and I'm on the ride. And before you know it, I'm 20 minutes away. So.
Okay. Yeah, because I do comedy as myself, and when I moved to Boston, I didn't have a car, and I would take the T everywhere. So it's a 45-minute to an hour T drive to and from open mics and shows. And I would listen back to the tapes and write new stuff and punch it up or do whatever on the T. And then when I bought a car 2 years ago, my commutes to and from shows went from an hour to 10 minutes. So I found myself in the drive of 10 minutes not going over the stuff that I did that night and working on it. I was like, oh, now I have to schedule time. Whereas opposed, I had an hour of downtime. So I didn't know if in the car, are you able to go through like the recording of the set and think about it and come up with new things? Or is it one of the, and do you have to pull over to write a note to yourself so you don't forget it?
No, I'm not really good with recording myself and listening back. But what I am doing now is, since I'm on tour and I'm doing the new hour, what I'll do is I will record it, and then I'll know during that set, all right, you definitely did a chunk that's new, or you added a couple of lines. And then what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll listen, and then I'll write it and I'll add it to the hour. But I don't listen pretty much through the whole thing always, unless it's just a very unique set. Because what I also want to do is, it's the muscle memory that you kind of want to be able to continue to do. So, for example, I remember, I'll tell you a good story. So I was at Stand-Up New York in New York City once, and everything was clicking, right? Everything was clicking. Every improv thing I did, it was just like all the tools in the belt were working when needed perfectly. Everything just was hitting, the crowd's going nuts, and I didn't tape it. And I remember I was on the road, and I called up Bill Burr. He's my mentor. I mean, he's my best friend. He's my son's godfather and stuff, so we're very close. And, he'll call me about things that happen in his day, and I'll call him. And I remember I called him and I'm like, dude, he's like, what's wrong? Because he could hear my voice. And I go, dude, I just did this set at Standup New York, and I had all these things just flowing and these extra improv things. And he goes, good. He goes, what are you going to do? He goes, you don't want to duplicate that, like, because then you're trying to duplicate it. You know, there's a famous thing about, like, I think it was like the Victor Wooten band or one of these crazy bands that had an amazing night. And then the next night they were like, yeah, let's not try to do that again. Just go out and make tonight's show what tonight's show is supposed to be. So so there's two things then, I guess. Yes, if you do riff a new bit, you obviously want to know what it was and write that down. But also let that night be that night, because it's not always going to be the same. And I did learn that too. So I record it just to see what new stuff I can take, but I kind of let it breathe too. If that makes any sense.
No, that makes great sense. So I got 3 more questions for you, and then I'll let you go. The first one is perfect to follow this one up, and it's one I ask a lot of comedians, and it's, do you consider yourself more of a comedy writer or comedy performer?
I would say with my personality and my act, I started out with the performance being better than the writing, just because of my personality, my storytelling, my animation. So it was always like, I would just tell you a story and you'd be in it because you'd be watching me. But I think as time has evolved, now the writing is catching up with that, and I'm trying to put both together. And I think that's when you ultimately can become you could try to master this thing as much as you can. I mean, you're never going to master it just because it's a very hard thing, and it could be done. You know, you see the greatest of all time go, oh, well, the next hour is better. And you're like, what do you mean? It's your 7th hour. And it's like, oh, well, no, it keeps evolving. But like, I remember I was outside. I don't know if you know Mike Vecchione, very funny comic. He's a great writer. And Mike is just he is like the prototypical, like, he just writes, and it's just joke, set up, punch. And I remember he went down to see me. I was performing at the Stand. And he goes, man, that story you tell, man, like, I wish I could do stuff like that. And then I said to him, yeah, but I wish I could do those quick one-liners all the time. But when you try, I think there should be a balance of both, because you never want to, like, if you watch Carlin, right? Carlin was a guy that you would see a great story, but then he would do like a silly dance and say a quick one-liner. And I think in my new hour now, I definitely have quicker jokes. I have some one-liners and stuff like that, along with stories and more personal stuff. So I want to mix the both, because I think if you're heavy just with one, I think it is lacking something, because you want the audience to have an experience, you know, as well.
Okay. And recently, obviously, I was going through, you know, old bits and your Comedy Central special and everything over the past couple of days to set up questions for you. And one of the things that I totally forgot that I watched until I saw it again was the that sketch between you, Sean Patton, and Christian Finnegan about bombing, and it's you in the sense of good will hunting.
Yes.
So this was an old, like, I'm originally from Baltimore, but I live in Boston now, and this is the thing that we used to talk about at when I started comedy was, if you could describe to somebody who is not a comedian what bombing feels like by using a scene from a movie, what movie scene do you think you would pick, obviously other than that Good Will Hunting moment?
I would say it's probably like Ben Stiller in Meet the Parents, when just everything went wrong. And then it was like, it starts with the little things. So the little things would be like, you know, just a joke that he did in front of everybody that fell flat, or them say, oh, you're a nurse. And then he's trying to like get out of it. And then ultimately, and then the volleyball hits her in the nose. By the way, I heard that actress passed away, rest her soul. But anyway,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like I heard, like not too long after the movie. But yeah, so then he does that, and then until ultimately he spray paints the cat, and then the whole family is there, and he passes, and then he gives up the fact where they were going on the honeymoon, and he thought it was, and then it all just, they were staring at him. So that's what being on stage is. You're like, okay, that didn't go good, but maybe I'll get him with this. All right, well that did, and then all of a sudden, it's just this. All right, it's not happening in this set, and it's over, and then you just kind of accept it. And then walking away to the way he just walked away and was like, all right, well, I'm going to the airport now. This is never happening. is the same as you just get in your car. So I always think of Ben Stiller because he always played just the awkward, odd man out, like nobody liking him type of thing. And that's a lonely feeling. And I think being on stage, bombing, it's a very lonely, but I'll tell you something will happen. I don't know how much time you have, but I'll tell you this. When you're bombing, okay, when you get how long have you been doing it?
I've been doing comedy almost 10 years.
Okay. So you're right at the point where you're like finding your real voice, and it's really you up there. And even if it's an exaggerated you know, it's still you more, but you're going to find that when you're bombing, it's not going to hurt as much because a couple things. You go, you know what, fuck you people. That was funny, and that's been working other places. This is you tight-ass people. You could do that if that's real. I'm not saying do that if it's not real, but if that's how you really feel, you know it's a good joke and they're being tight, you could also address it. Or you're just like, you know what, I get defiant sometimes. Like, I'll be like, okay, you didn't like that? Well, now you're really not going to like this.
Double down, yeah.
And you double down, and it's almost for you. Now you're going, yeah, you know what, they didn't like it, but I really fucking twisted the knife. And those are like little things that like give you like, okay, that's fine. Where when you're a young comic and you're eating your balls and you just go to the car and you're like, oh my God, like, you know, what am I doing with my life? And I just bombed and maybe I'm not funny. It hurts a lot more. But when you have the experience, you could be like, you could kind of understand why, I guess.
Good. That the feeling awkward and alone up there is a good way of putting it. I used to always say it's like the scene from Snatch where Brad Pitt's character is in the bare knuckle boxing and he gets knocked out and he falls down in the water because it's like you're just hit and all the air sucks out of you. You're kind of panicking for a moment. So,
yeah.
That's how I felt.
Yeah, Chris Rock always said bombing was like getting knocked out in boxing, and you know, he always compared it to boxing.
And the final question I have for you is, so you've been coming to Boston a few times, and you've been able to grow your career coming here. So you've done a few shows, and every time you come by, crowds get a little bit bigger, the venues get a little bit bigger. Is there a sense of pride in that, of going to a city that you're not from and scaling up each time you come in? And have you noticed this a repeat audience over the times that you've been here?
Yeah, Boston is I have a special place. There's a special place in my heart for Boston. My brother went to Boston University, and he's 5 years older than me. So I used to take those road trips to visit him, and you know, and go and drink out there and have a good time. But the big reason, and I mentioned this at the TD Garden when I opened for Bill, and when I was at the TD Garden, it was one of the greatest sets, you know, that I've ever had. You know, forget arena or, you know, because we did Madison Square Garden, but TD Garden was great. But, you know, the Dana-Farber Institute in Boston literally saved my mother's life. My mother was in like the final stage of stage 4 cancer. Like when she had stage 4, but bad. And they did this test drug, and this is like over 20 years and she's still here. So that was because of the Dana-Farber Institute. But I love Boston because, I don't know. I feel like I just love the city. It's a feeling that I get there. I think the people there, you know, I know they're nutty sports fans and all this stuff, but there's just there's an appreciation. I guess the best way I could sum it up is the ovation that Red Sox fans gave Derek Jeter is exactly why I love Boston. Because although it's like, yeah, you know what, fuck you, you're from New York and I'm from Boston, there's like this appreciation of something good. And if you do a joke that even they don't like because you're goofing on them, if it's good, they appreciate it. And I've always loved that about Boston. And there's certain cities like that, Washington, D.C. as well. But yeah, I love coming to Boston. And when I go to Boston and the numbers are more and more people come out and like, hey, I saw you here before. And it's true, the venues are getting bigger, and you know, people out there know me, and it means a lot. It's one of the cities that if I had to say what are my 5 best, you know, favorite places to perform, there's just something about the people of Boston and the comedy appreciation in that city that I truly love, and I love doing it, man. I love coming out there.
Excellent. All right. So, housekeeping is, I'm going to take this, trim it down, turn it into a Q&A style article for the newspaper, which will be out on Thursday. I'll swing by, laugh, drop off a copy or two to you. That way, if you want a print copy of it to keep for yourself, send to your mother, frame, throw away, whatever you want to do with it. I just like to make sure everyone has a print copy. And I just wanted to make sure it's okay that can I release this phone call conversation as a unedited podcast episode for my podcast as well?
100%.
All right, cool. Because usually the way I tag it is, see the full unedited conversation at this URL.
Sure.
So perfect.
No, absolutely. And dude, I wasn't just saying that. Your questions were, especially this week, like everything I went through this week, your questions were spot on, which was why, I mean, I hope if I was too long-winded with some, it was just because they were perfect questions for the time. Dude,
long-winded is fine. I'd rather have more to work with and trim it down than to have, one sentence answers from people. Like sometimes I can tell when some people are just doing these interviews because they have to and they're not engaged in it, and I'd rather have somebody be engaged, give real, honest, open answers that I can, hopefully people get a better sense of who you are through the answers instead of just like, oh, when did you start comedy? How are things on the road? Or, the typical things that people ask comedians in interviews that drive me up a fucking wall. So.
Yeah. How do you eat? It's like, I don't know. I just go to a place and I eat on the road. Like,
Like, I mean, if there's Joe Kim Booster, I talked to him about working out on the road because working out's very important to him. But everyone else is going to ask different road story questions. But I want, for him, and it is a good example where I want something that you're going to give me a real response to. And for you, I followed your comedy career and I re-upped on a lot of things, so I know things. And I'm surprised you can't hear me talking to you on the phone, even though I'm hiding in the bushes behind you right now. So.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like last night was just a really cool night at the Cellar, and it happens a lot. And, you think about it on a ride home, and you're like, of all the things I'm doing in my life, right? Like I could be doing anything. Like this is like the one job where like you just get like these cool things that it's like, and it's because of hard work that got you to be able to do that. And it's really cool. So when you asked the driving home question, it's like that's kind of what you reflect on. And again, like, and then you're like, oh man, now I just could kind of chill on the road. There's really no traffic because it's late. And you just kind of go through it. So that's why it was like the timing of the question was great, along the umpire thing too. So, and yeah, man, if you want to come out to Boston and hang out at a show, man, I come in the back and I'd love to meet you.
Will do. I'll drop something off either Thursday or one of the nights that week. I can't remember. I can't remember what my schedule is next week, but I'll definitely swing by and drop something off and say hi. So, all right?
Sounds great, man. Thanks so much, buddy.
No problem. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, see you soon, man. Bye.
the time.